As we are officially in game week for week one, with week one game starting just in a few days, I want to take a few minutes and talk about the quarterback landscape in college football heading into week one, and essentially go over the first year starters, the big games that come to mind, whether it's big quarterbacks against good defenses or just good quarterback matchups in general, and then some underrated quarterback storylines as well. And then with one other storyline I want to talk about is this some wild quarterback topics that we'll keep in throughout the season. But we got a kind of a wild one already in week one I want to go over. But before we go into the meat and potatoes of the actual video, I just want to encourage you to consider subscribing to the YouTube channel if you like any quarterback related content. Usually we do film breakdowns and kind of more analysis, but with the season started, I wanted to kind of do a weekly preview, if you will. So we'll go ahead and start with week one now. So I think I want to dive into the actual kind of the wild and random quarterback topic, and that is quarterback Zeb Noland. It used to be graduate assistant Zeb Noland, but now quarterback Zeb Noland for the University of South Carolina. So with Luke Doty being injured this week, Zeb Noland just started practicing a few weeks ago, being a graduate assistant, and is now going to take the snaps in their opening game. So Zeb Noland was formerly at Nebraska, then transferred to North Dakota State, and then he actually got playing time this spring whenever North Dakota State had their seasons. Let's look at his numbers real quick, because it's kind of bizarre, this whole kind of storyline unfolding in front of our eyes, essentially. So Zeb Noland, again, the transfer from North Dakota State, transferring in to South Carolina. Let's see if we can pull up his stats real quick. So 2020 stats, he had 5 touchdowns passing, 1 touchdown rushing. His interceptions were at 6. His completion percentage was in that 50-ish range, and he had 720 yards passing, and this was 6 games, essentially. This the 7th game, he only threw 1 attempt. So in 6 games, he had 720 yards passing, 5 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown, and was 51 of 100 completions per attempt. So again, I think it's kind of a wild storyline. I'm looking forward to just watching it because of the history and the simple fact he's a graduate assistant. I think it's going to be interesting. So just that's our wild and random quarterback storyline of the week. Let's get into more of the kind of more interesting storylines, in my opinion, and that's the big game matchups. Let's dive into Wisconsin and Penn State. So Wisconsin, we got quarterback Graham Mertz going up against Penn State, and he's a guy who is probably their most talented quarterback Wisconsin's had, probably by far, since they've had Russell Wilson. So having a full season, because last year, with COVID and being out for a little bit after his big game against Illinois, I wouldn't even call it a full season. So this is actually his first full season, in my opinion, starting. And so getting his foot off on a good step, essentially, against Penn State would be huge. Dynamic athlete. I shouldn't say dynamic athlete, but he's a good athlete for a Wisconsin quarterback. Can push the ball downfield. So we could see more kind of the play calls and just the offense being opened up with Mertz against Penn State. And on the other side with Penn State, Sean Clifford, this would be huge for a bounce-back season, right? And we've talked about Clifford before on the channel. He struggled with turnovers last year, but with a new OC coming in, I think he does fit the OC's offensive scheme. Now it's just, can he execute that scheme, right? So in my opinion, I do think he'll put him in a position to succeed, and I think this is probably one of the best matchups in all of college football this weekend. I know there's some bigger games technically, but this is a big game with the 2 powerhouse Big Ten teams going at each other. And I think each team will need solid quarterback play to win this game. Let's dive into Alabama and Miami, because this goes under the first year starting as well, right? So we got Bryce Young making his starting debut against Miami. In my opinion, it's going to be a bit of plug and chug right now for Miami. I think they have such good solid weapons around Bryce Young that I think even if he doesn't elevate the play around him for this game, at least starting off, I think the talent around Bryce Young is so good and so rich, if you will, that he's going to have a good opening game against Miami. And I think it comes down to Derek King, right? And if he is able to lead Miami to the upset, I think you're going to have to see him run a little bit, but then make quick, decisive throws. That's kind of like how you can really tell if someone's bounced back from injuries. Quick, decisive throws. Don't hold on the ball too long. Don't second-guess yourself. So if that's the case, and for Miami to pull off the upset, King's going to need to be on his A game and have those quick, decisive throws. Let's move on to Clemson and Georgia, game of the week, right? We got DJU making his 3rd start against JT Daniels, who's only making his 5th start for Georgia, I believe, right? Is that right? Only his 5th or 6th start for Georgia, as he only started the last few games last year. With Georgia's offense, for them to win, Daniel's going to have to elevate the play around him. They got some guys that are injured, right? Some of his supporting cast is injured, so he's going to need to elevate the play around him as they push the ball downfield. Whenever he came in last year, the yards per attempt went from the 7-ish range to over 10, which is outstanding and a very high yards per attempt right there. So Georgia needs to do that to beat Clemson. DJU, what makes him so special is his ability to fit the ball into tight spaces, good anticipation factor. Of course, he has a strong arm, but it's the anticipation and decisiveness that allows him to utilize that strong arm. So I think this is by far the marquee matchup of the week, of the weekend, essentially. And we can see some solid quarterback play. Last game I want to talk about as far as the big game goes. Actually, we got 2 more games. I think LSU and UCLA. I think we can see some good quarterback play. I'm excited to see Max Johnson go up against UCLA, and with Doran Thompson, with DTR kind of struggling last week against like Hawaii. One, they didn't need him because they ran the ball so well, and 2, I'm not too concerned about. I think we'll see a good game from him against LSU, or UCLA needs to have a good game from him if they want to beat LSU. Last kind of big game I want to talk about is Notre Dame against Florida State. Fighting Irish starting Jack Cohen, the transfer from Wisconsin. So we're looking forward to seeing how he does in the Florida State situation. As of now, there hasn't been a starter yet. And from just what kind of I'm hearing from Florida State people, they wouldn't be surprised if it is Jordan Travis. Again, we'll be keeping track of this because I think it's a very interesting game. I think Notre Dame obviously has the upper hand, but I'm still interested in seeing the Florida State kind of quarterback situation develop. Let's dive into some of these big guys making their first start of their career, essentially. And let's start with C.J. Stroud against Minnesota. So the Ohio State quarterback taking over for Justin Fields, probably the most talented quarterback room in the nation, and he's getting his start against Minnesota. We expect him to do well. From there, we talked about Bryce Young. We talked about DJU, even though he already started last year. Let's talk about Hudson Card a bit from Texas. So he's a guy who was just named the starter a few days ago. We talked about him. We put out a film breakdown video about him, actually, because I think you're going to see a lot of good tools from him. He's very high ceiling, strong arm, able to run as well, very good athletic quarterback. And then he's just very accurate downfield, does a good job throwing his guys open, at least from his high school tapes. It's going to be interesting to see him against Louisiana and see him in the offense. Right now, the point spread is 8, I believe, so people expect it to be a bit of a closer game than what most people probably realize. Louisiana is a very good G5 team. And so Texas fans, essentially, you want Card to come in, ball out, beat Louisiana handily, and have a good rest of the season. But again, keep your eyes on that. Be interesting. Haynes King from Texas A&M making his first start against Kent State. Don't think there should be really any issue there. And then we have Emory Jones from Florida making his first start against FAU. Again, don't think there should be really any issue there, but still worth noting. He is making his first start, and he's a guy we've talked about on the channel a lot. And so we'll do a more kind of deep dive on Emory Jones later on this week against FAU and kind of what the FAU defense brings. Okay, let's talk real quick. Let's go over some underrated games or some kind of group of 5 games. We have UCF against Boise State. They open up Thursday. I don't remember exactly if that's a home game for UCF or not. Regardless, both teams have new coaching staffs, right? So there's going to be some. You kind of don't know what to expect offensively yet. You have an idea with Gus Malzahn, but you don't know how much is going to be his Auburn offense, how much he's keeping over from the previous staff. So we got Dylan Gabriel going up against Hank Bachmeier from Boise State, who was just named the starting quarterback, beat out Jack Sears from Boise State. So I think it's an interesting matchup. It could be one of the more intriguing games of the whole weekend, and it's more of on the underrated side. So I'm excited for both these quarterbacks. Nevada versus Cal, another underrated game. Carson Strong, a potential first-round pick, has gotten a lot of hype, a lot of buzz, and rightfully so. Strong-arm kid who can make any throw on the field. They could potentially upset Cal. Last kind of game that I want to talk about is Fresno State against Oregon. Oregon coming in, starting Anthony Brown. You know, they're the favorites. They should win handily. But Jake Haener from Fresno State is an absolute dude. I think we're going to see him kind of pop on the scene more and more. Had a good year last year. Had a great game against who they play UConn this past weekend. Granted, it's UConn, take it with a grain of salt, but still balled out. Had a good showcase against them. I expect him to have a great season. And I'm not calling upset alert here, but if Fresno State wants to win this game, it's going to come down to Jake Haener just playing lights out. So again, keep that game on tap if you're a quarterback fan. So again, just to kind of recap, we talked about the first year guys starting. We had some big game matchups. Talked about the crazy wild topic with Zeb Noland from South Carolina starting, and then we had some underrated games as well. What games did I miss? What quarterback matchups are you looking forward to? Let us know in the comments below. And during the week, we'll have some more film breakdowns and some rapid reactions after the week 1 games. But for right now, let us know in the comments below what games you're most looking forward to as long as it's related to the quarterback position. It can be against the defense. It can be quarterback against quarterback. Let us know below. We'll see you next time on our next quarterback related video.